Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Good morning. Hello, Jennifer, and I can hear you. So all good.
Excellent.
Excellent.
For some
Perfect. Yeah, I
reason,
could.
my my mic and my camera are not showing up in Restream, but everything seems to be working, so we're gonna go with it.
Okay, perfect. No, they had some technical issues just 15 minutes before we went live. So I think maybe some of this is still not working perfectly. But I
Okay.
was a bit stressed out. But it seemed to be all coming into place just right on time. So everything is working. I can hear you. I can see you as well. So that's great. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining today. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. For, can you believe it, the end of our graph learning journey month of certification, month of learning in June, where we had a couple of very interesting sessions. I think it all kicked off with Adam talking about GraphAcademy in general. We had Alison to talk about graph analytics and graph data science. Sid talked about Gen AI and how that makes a difference in learning, but also in using technology. And today, last but not least, we have you, Jennifer, joining us to talk about the big one, I guess, how to pass the Neo4j certification exam like a pro, and what can be done, I guess, once you pass it, what you need to do to prepare for it, and how to be successful and not disappointed by the whole thing, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to have you. How are you, first of all, now that we got the technicalities out of the way?
Doing okay, yeah. My voice is in and out a little bit, so hopefully the sound will come through okay. But yeah, I caught some kind of cold thing over the weekend, but
Oh, no.
otherwise, yeah, everything's going pretty well.
That's good. Okay, super. I asked in chat if people have already passed the Neo4j certification. So if you are watching us live, either on YouTube or on Twitch, on other channels, on the community forum, our colleague Ari has a live stream set up there. Let us know in chat on all the systems. We're watching them all. Let us know if you passed the certification, if you have struggled maybe with it in the past, if you are already the super pro, and maybe you have some tips and tricks. Share those as well from your side of the house, basically. And if you have not passed it yet, you come to the right place. I think Chris was one of the first to say, well, I haven't passed it yet, so I think, Chris, this is for you. We hopefully we can show you it's not as daring as it seems, and it's not as difficult. And with Jennifer's tips, I think you'll be set on the path to success, I guess, for the certification.
That's the plan.
That's the plan. So I think you had a couple of slides
Yes.
for this. So shall we dive in and
Yes.
and talk about this? And as always, while Jennifer gets the slides up, and I said this just before, but just to repeat again, if you have questions, if you have feedback, if you have particularly today about certification, obviously let us know. We will look at that and see if we can answer the question that you might have. Let me see. Yeah.
Yep,
I can
and that
see
is
your
showing,
screen.
but it's not. 1 second. Oops. Yeah, let me try that again.
Yeah, maybe it's sharing the wrong screen.
Yeah, I think so. There we go. Let's try one more time. Mm-hmm. Okay. So let me dive back over here and there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Alrighty.
So hopefully this presentation will help you know what to look for, what to study for, and how to best prepare for the exam. Now, I won't give you guys the answers, sorry, but
that
we
would
will
be
walk
cheating.
through. Yes, no cheating. But we will give you all of the skills that you need in order to prep for the exam and hopefully not feel nervous about it. I am a developer advocate at Neo4j, have been for the last several years. I passed the certification in March of 2018, so that's been several years ago now. And I was just after I joined Neo4j. So I've been here a while. I like learning technology, and then I like sharing what I've learned through a variety of different channels, whether that's technical speaking, virtually or live, tech blogging, podcasting. And I do have hobbies outside of work, but most of those are very geeky and I enjoy those. If you have questions that come up after today's session, feel free to reach out to me or on the community channel to any of us at Neo4j. We're happy to help you along the way or answer questions or kind of guide you in the right direction. I know a lot of times our best questions come up after something live is done and gone, right? So don't hesitate on that. First off, we're just going to talk broadly about the exam rules. What are the boundaries? If you've been around maybe the Neo4j community for a while, I actually did a reprise of this presentation or a first draft of this presentation years ago, and I've updated it now. So then I had Pirates of the Caribbean screenshots in the slides. And I figured that is now over 20 years old, which I can't believe is feasible. So I updated it a little bit, and I'm stuck with kind of a similarly geeky theme of Marvel, because there's constantly new stuff being released for Marvel. All right, so exam rules, outlines, and such things that you need to know. The goal of the exam is to learn and understand the concepts and how to use Neo4j through practice. So it is a very hands-on, how would you go about doing this, solving real problems like you would when you're faced with building applications or with writing queries or what have you. The exam is completely free and you have an unlimited number of attempts. However, there is one caveat. Once you take the exam, if you don't pass it, you have to wait 24 hours before you can take it again. That gives you some time to let your brain kind of settle on the information a bit, to study a bit more if you need to, and then retake it after 24 hours. So plenty of time there. And again, if you don't pass, you just wait another 24 hours and you take it again. Same thing, that continues, unlimited numbers of attempts there. You have about 80 questions on the exam. The scoring is a pass or fail, and to pass, you have to have 80% or more of the points. The format is either a choose the best answer, so select a single answer from the list, or check all that apply, where you could select multiples. You get, the way I've figured it up, I think about 45 seconds per question. So that's a reasonable amount of time, but you do want to have several questions or the content and concepts well in your mind so that some of the questions will be very easy. You can click through in maybe 2 or 3 seconds minimum. And then other questions you have more time to spend on and think through. You can go back and review some questions that you're unsure of if you have leftover time. So don't hesitate on that. And then each question works out to about 1.25 points per question. And that's going to depend on the question format though. So if you have a choose multiple answers, then of course that's going to reduce. So if you have to choose 2 or 3 checked answers for that, that's going to reduce the question by half or a third or what have you, or each answer selection you choose is going to reduce the number of points for each selection. So it does divvy out pretty nicely. It's relatively few points per question. So if you miss 1 or 2 questions, that shouldn't fail you overall. But just to be aware, that's kind of how it divides up. All right. And I tweaked this quote just a little bit. So you should invest some time studying, but you should be able to overcome the challenges. This is not made to trick you, or the exam is not made to be unfeasible or impossible. It's really to show what you know and what you've practiced and done with Neo4j. The question breakdown is a mix of both theory and practice. So Cypher is the largest chunk of the exam. It's about 32 questions. And then following, you have general Neo4j conceptual stuff, some modeling and schema questions, both 11 questions in each of those categories, and then drivers and import, much fewer questions there as well. But you have a little bit of everything. So when you're focusing and devoting your time, I would spend most of your time studying Cypher and clauses and things like that. Maybe even practicing working with Neo4j using Cypher queries, and then a little less time on some of the other sections, if you will, because those won't be as heavily weighted. All right, let's dig into exactly what to study, things you want to focus on, specific topics, and so on. If you've seen some of the content out there, there are a few GraphAcademy free online training courses that we recommend you take before you take the exam. Now, these are not required, but they do go over most of the concepts, all of the concepts that are on the exam. And of course, varying detail and degrees on that. But you don't have to take these training courses in order to pass, but you do need to know these concepts that are covered in these courses. So if you want to refresh, or if you want to review some of the concepts and maybe some of the terms and such, these are good courses to fill you in or to refresh that content. But again, these are not required in order to pass the exam. All right, let's look at the Neo4j topic. What do you need to know in just general Neo4j conceptual stuff? So things like the elements of Neo4j, of course, your nodes, your relationships, the key features and benefits. So especially relationships, that's a vital point of Neo4j, right? Things like ACID, index-free adjacency. There's a couple of questions on this. So just if you know what they are and how to explain them, that's probably fine. And then some of the tools, so things like Cypher, things like Bolt. Can you connect with drivers? Can you write a Cypher query? Things like that, or what you need to know. Just general conceptual stuff. All right, let's look at Cypher. Remember, this is the heaviest section of the exam. You need to know things like syntax, the best practices, how to work on query performance, update, debug, those sorts of things. There's several questions out there on what happens when you have this Cypher statement, or what happens when you have this problem. So again, that's that practice, that hands-on experience type of question. You have some questions on constraints and indexes, things like your index and constraint types. And there's a couple of questions on there on unusual indexes, things like full text and vector. Not very many there, but again, just knowing what they are and that they're available is probably fine. You definitely need to know the common clauses of Cypher and the values that you're going to get, things like distinct, order by, with, and so on. The main things that you use a lot as a developer writing Cypher queries. You need to know explain and profile what those are. How do you debug a query? How do you read the query plan that comes back? What are DB hits? Are they important or not? Just generic label scans and such that come back in the planner, stuff like that. It's nothing really in the weeds, but all just very high level. How do you debug a query? How can you update and fix it and improve performance? And then I did find it a little bit odd. There was one question on there about Cypher versus GraphQL. Now, GraphQL, I know, is a tool for Neo4j. It's an add-on or an extra library, but there is a lot of confusion in the general community that GraphQL is a graph query language. It is not. So do understand the difference, that Cypher is a query language. GraphQL is not. It's a tool. So again, one question there, you don't need to know any details or work with GraphQL, just know conceptually what the difference is there. All right, let's look at specifically some of the keywords and go through some of the practices for you just to refresh your memory and get some of these concepts solidified in your brain. Merge is unique to at least graph databases, if not even Cypher Neo4j, but it does a find or create. You need to understand how it functions. Remember that it is focused on patterns. If you specify an entire pattern with merge, it will find or create that entire pattern. So therefore, if part of the pattern already exists, it will create duplicates. So a much better practice is to change that full pattern that specified the merge order ordered product into merges of the individual components. So merge the order node, merge the product node, and then merge the relationship. So just understand that conceptual difference and how you end up with distinct entities versus duplicate relationships or duplicate nodes on that. Detach delete is, again, something that is graph specific. You do delete for disconnected nodes and detach delete when you have relationships potentially out there, or if you're not sure if there's relationships and you want to remove certain nodes. So I've shown one practice there in the red of match product, delete product, but that's only if you know that you don't have relationships on product or attached to product. Where the bottom one is probably a better practice for if you're uncertain if there's relationships out there, or if you don't care if there's relationships, you want to remove those product nodes, you match order ordered product and you detach delete those products. So then you're left with the order nodes It removes the product and it removes the relationship attached to those products, but you'll still be left with orders. So understand the difference between just delete and detach delete and what happens in both of those scenarios. Again, some good practice going through some of the Cypher fundamentals, online training courses, building applications, playing around with some of our sandboxes. All of this will become very familiar as you go. Optional match, again, very graph specific. You're finding potential patterns that also allows room for nulls. So it accepts nulls. If those potential patterns exist, it's going to return those additional entities that are connected. If not, it's still going to return the original rows that were selected. I've got the link to the documentation if you want to look more into this. But as an example, the Cypher query there at the bottom of the slide is you're looking for staff members who work in a particular building. Maybe you want to see who all is staffing that or how many employees you have assigned to that building. And then optionally, you might want to return the orders that a staff member sold. Now, what if you have a couple of trainees or you have some people who are just maybe janitors or things like that, but they're still staffing that building, but they haven't sold orders? You might still want to return all those staff members because you want to see who all do I have working a building at a particular time, but maybe they haven't sold particular orders. But optionally, you might want to see how many orders have been sold through different employees or so on. So you can do that optional match to say, find staff members that sold orders and return, in this case, the building, the person, the position, and the count of the orders each person has sold. And remember, that's going to be optional. For people who haven't sold orders, it'll just return a null empty there. But for those who have, you'll get the number of the orders they've sold. So again, optional match allows for nulls, but will add additional patterns or additional data as needed. Then the return statement. So this is a key thing you need to know. How do you deal with different result formats? You have graph results, you have table results, you have property selectors. So node.property, know how to work with that pretty well. Some aggregation stuff. There's not a whole lot of questions on that, but just understand how they work. And then the implicit group by. This was something that was totally different for me coming from a SQL background into Cypher, but one that I found was so much easier in Cypher. And that is that what you return, the first set of properties you return, it implicitly groups by those. So if you return the customer name and then the orders and so on, what are the products, it will automatically group by the customer name and then group by the orders and then group by the products for each order. So again, just understand generally how that works and what those things look like. The aggregations and group by is a little bit different from other query languages. And just general conceptual stuff here. You need to know how to work with it, be hands-on about it, in order to understand all the differences and nuances here. But return and merge, match, all of those are key factors of Neo4j and Cypher that you need to know well. The with statement. This is super helpful. And again, maybe something that's not super intuitive if you're coming from other languages, but with passes intermediate results or patterns to the next part of the query. It also can help you limit scope and reduce data that's carried throughout the query. Again, I've linked the documentation link there if you want to dig into the wording and all the details and examples. But a couple of examples I've provided here. So for instance, match order contains product. Maybe you want to return the products as these are the products that have been ordered. So you'll return the product as ordered product, alias it, and then return that should be a return ordered product. Sorry about that. I'll fix that. But yeah, you would return these products and say, hey, these products have been ordered because I've selected order contains product rather than just all the products. And then the bottom query there, order contains product. With your orders, collect all the product names as products. And then maybe you'd want to return the orders, all the products that are per order, and then the number of products that were on each order. So again, you're using with to sum up, to aggregate, to alias, and then potentially to limit the scope. So you could have a much bigger pattern specified in that first match, and you would only pass pieces of it into the next part of the query. So again, just understand how with works and what you do with it and how it's used. I find I use with quite a bit. It's very frequent in my queries. So this is something you probably need to know pretty well. And then subqueries. Now, initially when subqueries came out and was added to Cypher a few years back, I thought, I don't really need to use a whole lot of subqueries. I, work with all my regular queries just fine. I don't need it. And so I didn't think I would use it all that often. And what I've actually found is that I use subqueries a lot in practice. Anytime that I want to section off a little piece of the computation or the operation, I'll dump it into a call subquery and then pass out only what I need out of that. So as an example, I've got like a data import statement here on the right-hand side of the slide. And you can see I'm trying to import products from a CSV. And with each of those CSV rows, I'll create the product entities, the nodes, and set some values on that, and then return the whole product, and then create the type category for that product. I match those products, retrieve the type category, and then create the relationship there. So again, I'm kind of sectioning off. I'm creating products in one call subquery, and then I'm attaching those products to a related entity in the next subquery, and so on. Just a way to kind of organize things a little bit and section off parts of your query and differentiate those. So understand the syntax, look at some examples, understand how you pass data in and pass data out. So you'll notice that I have a with row, which I think recently is not required anymore to pass some of that in. So that syntax has changed just a bit. And then you do need to return something out of the subquery if you want to reference that thing later. So you notice I've got returns in the first subquery because I'm passing that product on into the next subquery. But then that second call, I don't return anything because I can just return the overall products. I don't care about how many relationships or connections I've created. So again, I've got the documentation link in that bottom bullet point. If you want to review this or look at some other examples and practice it on your own, I would definitely look at this and understand how it works. Okay, let's look at graph data modeling. Just general things here, parts of the language. So if you have been around Neo4j for a while, but maybe haven't taken the exam, we often talk about mapping nouns and verbs to nodes and relationships, respectively. So this is something that crops up in our online training courses. It's something that crops up in a lot of our beginner content. But just to refresh your memory, understand that we typically try to map nodes to nouns and relationships to verbs as parts of the language, or the English language at least. Understand a little bit about query plan debugging. So again, that explain a profile, how to read one. Relationship direction is super important, bidirectional, and so on. How you work with that, how Neo4j works with relationship directions, where you can store it in a particular direction, retrieve it in any direction. Intermediate nodes, there's only 1 or 2 questions on this, but understand how we model hypernodes or intermediate nodes, if you will, and then some best practices around graph data modeling and how and why you would refactor. There's a couple of questions on there that says, how would you refactor this graph data model into something like this? And then why would you do something this way? Why would you refactor the graph from this to this? What would be the business use case for that? So there's a couple of questions there. Again, if you've been around the block a few times and done some modeling, you've probably been exposed to all of these concepts, but it's always good review. Importing data. Remember that this is a very small subset of questions, but it is still there. So if you've had some practice with importing using our data importer tool, this is probably good, but just some things to kind of refresh your mind. Load CSV is probably the main way that we do a lot of our data loading, and that we have outlined in our online training courses. So be pretty familiar with how to load CSVs, the different data types that Neo4j supports, the import sequencing and batching. There's only a couple of questions on that, so very low key there, but just kind of understand the general concepts and what those queries might look like. And then driver section, again, another really small one. Understand the protocol that we use, hint, bolt. Connection details, so how you break down the connection URI, the username, the password, what comes back from the driver and the return results, a basic question or two on encryption and authentication, things like the +S at the end and so on. 1 or 2 questions on transactions. Again, just generally, do you know what a transaction looks like? And then I will note that there's a couple of driver examples in the exam, and it is very, very simple code, but it is in Python. So if you're not familiar at all with Python, or would just be like totally freeze, I don't know what to do, it might not be a bad idea to go through the Using Neo4j with Python course that just kind of gets you familiar with basic syntax and driver connection using the Python language. Or if you want to like look at some Python and so on, that's another good option. I'm a Java developer by nature. I had no trouble reading the Python. It is very, very introductory. Looking at it, it applies pretty much the same way to connect to the driver as you do in any language. So it's going to feel very familiar. But if you're a little bit nervous about it or want to look at some Python code, that's not a bad thing. Just to be prepped for that, beware. I don't want you to freeze up and go, oh no, Python, I don't know what to do. So if you're a Python developer, you're set. If not, just be aware that there's a couple of simple examples in Python there. All very manageable to developers. Okay. Some tips and tricks from my end on what I would recommend you do, things that I would focus on. I'm super particular about studying, so these are my things. First off is it's not a bad idea to have a few notes. It is an open book exam. You don't have a ton of time to go out searching the web for a lot of questions or to like build your own example or something like that. So have a few notes on concepts that you tend to forget or things that you might think are super important or key words that you might want to remember, and put in some hands-on. Go through some of the courses if you want to, build your own applications, review some of the code you've written in the past if you've done that, run a couple of our sandboxes and explore some queries and the models. And it might not be a bad idea either to have an instance open to test or verify some things. Again, with these Cypher queries, there's a few examples out there that show a Cypher query and say, what are the return results for this? Or how would you go about modifying that? If you have an instance open, you can tweak those queries and use the like Cypher editor lines and stuff that will show you where stuff is not syntactically correct or show you how to fix keywords or so on. So you can use that Cypher editor in our browser tool or our query tool that will kind of help you write good code. And that might help you along as well. Again, it's open book, so you can go out to the web, but you're not going to have a lot of time to do that for every question. So again, these are the 3 things I would recommend if you want to have some extra things in the background or things that might be specific to you that you would rather have. These would just be kind of my go-tos. And then when you pass the exam, you will get a free t-shirt out of it with the logo that is shown here on the right-hand side of the slide. You'll get an official certificate with your name. You'll have a pre-written bullet point that you can add to your resume or your CV. And of course, if you ping us on social channels or on the community forums or channels that we have out, we are more than happy to celebrate that with you and to promote it on our channels as well, and to broadcast that and celebrate along with you. So don't hesitate to reach out and do that. We'll all kind of have a little miniature congrats party for you. All right, resources. The training classes that are on GraphAcademy, again, free, online, self-paced. The actual link to the certification is there on the second bullet point. There's an updated blog post. So I had written a blog post years ago. It has not been updated, but this one has been updated as of this year. And it goes over passing both certifications, the dev certification and the analytics certification. So if you want to check out a little bit on that, or you can skip the analytics piece and focus on the dev certification piece of that blog post, you're more than welcome to do that. And that is from a community member. So it is very valid and relatable for you. And then the community channels. If you have questions, if you want to follow up on some things, or if you just want to explore the questions that are out there and things that people are running up against, or post your own questions, by all means, please join us there and do that. So now I will open it up to questions. If you have questions, I will do my best to answer or to point you in the right direction.
Cool. Thank you very much, Jennifer. That was intense. Quick.
Yes, very quick.
Very quick, very fast overview of all the individual chapters of the certification. I see 2 questions at the moment, but I'm happy to take take more questions. So type them in, put them in chat. I'll have also a look at what Arish sends me, if he sends me anything. Yeah. So far, nothing. And then I have a question or two on my own, but we can we don't have to stretch it out forever. But let's start with Ankita. Ankita asks, will the questions only be multiple choice or check boxes, or is there actually the need to type in and write cipher queries yourself?
You do not need to write cipher queries. Now, if you have a browser window open and you want to cross-check the cipher query or write some of the syntax and have our query editor help you, you can do that in a separate tab, but the actual test question will be a multiple choice, either choose the single best answer or choose multiple answers, and that will be it. So nothing where you have to try to type or worry about typos or syntax or anything like that.
Yep, cool. That's great. Another question from Ankita. She asks, do we really need to go through the entire Cipher manual and or operations manual for this certification, because they are very lengthy? Yes.
You are correct. They are very lengthy. Yeah, they dive into a lot of details that most of the time you don't need. Again, this is kind of general. As a general developer, what are you going to use the most of? So it's going to be things like merge, with, match, optional patterns, some of the subquery stuff, things like that. You do not need to go through the entire manual. If you want to just hit the highlights, that's why I recommend that GraphAcademy Cipher Fundamentals course. That will kind of show you the highlights and overviews of the things you really need to know. Or I think personally, if you've done a few projects or had some hands-on before with some of our sandboxes or courses or what have you, then you probably already have the skills and have used a lot of the syntax and the clauses that are going to be asked on the test. You probably don't need to go into any other depth. I tried to highlight a couple of random bits that were on the exam throughout this presentation, things that were popped up unexpectedly. But otherwise, I don't think there should be really any surprises there.
Okay, that's good to know. And I have in the video description on YouTube, you'll find all the links to the various documentation bits you highlighted or you called out, plus a couple of community blogs, the one that you are sharing right now, but there are a couple of other ones on this Neo4j certification and the passing of this exam. So they will be there in the video description.
I think there was even one that just got published this week, right?
I think so. Yeah. I had this one. What's the value? I think this is here. I think. Let me quickly get that. Double checking. But yeah, this is Ari had shared Neo4j certification. What's the value blog post, and I'll put that in the chat here as well. It's about his perspective on outside perspective from publishing a certification badge on LinkedIn maybe or somewhere else. I think you mentioned it. We celebrate with you, but maybe it's a good segue to one of the questions I had is how would you say what's the value from your point of view when somebody's certified? How can people showcase this? What's the impact of showcasing this in your point of view, and why does it matter to showcase it actually, I guess?
Yeah, I think just from a personal perspective, it shows other people, the community, potential job searchers and so on, that you're learning and keeping up on your skills with the latest, greatest technologies. You're expanding your horizons. You're interested in what's out there and what's available. And I think that shows a lot of integrity and a lot of dedication to just generally the tech field and the tech community. So any expansion of skills, anything you add as a bullet point on your resume or your CV is a great thing just generally for your career. As far as Neo4j goes, there's a lot of talk now, especially with AI and things going on about knowledge graphs and graph rag and other sorts of things. And while you don't necessarily need to implement those sorts of things, knowing what it is and how it works even just on a general conceptual level, is super valuable when you go into discussions for, well, what kind of systems are we going to use? Why is this a good fit, or why is it not a good fit? And understanding just generally what it's used for and how it works is a great way to showcase that, hey, I know what I'm doing. I know when to use this and when not to use it. And you can make well-informed, good decisions in your business use cases and tech that comes up. So I think it's valuable on a general career, personal development sort of aspect, as well as in your specific business scenario. Whether your industry cares about graphs or not, it's still a good skill to add. So you can either, weed it out from the list or add it and say, hey, we should really consider this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And especially like you just outlined with GraphRag and all the increased, I would say, interest in the technology together with AI. I think it's a good way to say, okay, hey, I have fundamental understandings, or even a little bit more than fundamentals, I would say, understandings if you pass certification. And you can talk about the topics, you can talk about what's going on there, and you can say, hey, I looked at this, I understand what's going on, and I can potentially recommend a way forward if, company, project, whatever, wants to use AI plus maybe something, or wants to use, something tech data related, and then you see, hey, there's a solution.
Yep, you have something to contribute to the conversation for sure.
Totally. Yeah. Cool. Another question from Ankita. Ankita asks, only the 4 courses you mentioned are enough to go through, or do you recommend going through the Cypher intermediate tutorials as well?
That is a good question. So actually, let me check what that intermediate covers. I just went through the 4 fundamental courses. But let's see. Okay. So the intermediate Cypher queries, I just looked at the overview of the course right now. It does things like querying for null values, checking values, range queries, list inclusion, case insensitive search. I don't think there's any questions on the exam about that. The one thing that is on that course is optional match. So if you're not sure if you want to go through that, it might not be a bad thing to hit that. It's the first module. There's an optional match lesson in there. And then there's a little bit on ordering results. So like how you would return ordered results, or limiting or skipping or counting. There's a little bit on aggregating and stuff. I mean, there's a few tidbits in that intermediate that might be useful, but I don't think you need to go through the whole course in order to pass.
Yeah, maybe the intermediate could be seen as some kind of like a prep course for certification. If you feel, you did them all, but you don't want to quite commit on doing the certification, intermediate is a little bit more advanced. It gives you a little bit more of a challenge. And if you feel like having, you can answer these questions, you feel like, oh yeah, I know this, I know that, I can understand what's going on, you're probably very well set up for actually doing the certification.
Yeah, and I think if you haven't had a whole lot of hands-on, the intermediate Cypher course might be a good thing to kind of get you exposed to, well, how would you write this Cypher? Or here's a Cypher, how would you tweak it? And it would deal with a lot more of those less common clauses maybe to get you comfortable. So optional entirely, depending on where you are in your learning journey. But there's definitely a few lessons in there that wouldn't hurt for this. The other course I would recommend is some sort of language driver programming language course. So whether that's the using X language with Neo4j course, I think there's both Python and Java out there for those. Those just introduce you to basic driver concepts. And there's probably others coming. And I know we have some other like full application courses. You don't need to go through the full application course. You really just need to deal with how to connect to the driver and return results from it. So it's like the first few lessons or module, if you will, for each of those. But again, if you haven't done a lot of hands-on, it might not be a bad idea to go through one of those courses for your desired language and just understand how the driver works.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, for now I don't see any more questions. I'll ask one, and then we see if other questions come in. The question I had noted down, I wanted to ask you was what areas of the exam do you think are most challenging? What is the most, the most difficult bit where you think, okay, yeah, this could be really, I don't want to say super hard or very disencouraging for people, but so you do this and then you say, oh wow, this is a tough one.
Yeah, probably the cipher section, which I know kind of seems, intuitive or like, oh yeah, that makes sense to most people. But I've written a lot of cipher queries over the course of my Neo4j tenure, but it's always a little nerve-wracking to know, well, what kind of cipher queries are they going to ask? Are we going to come across something that I'm not familiar with or haven't done a lot with? And again, this test is not to stump you or to be impossible. It is to show that you know how to work with cipher, that you know how to work with Neo4j. So in my opinion, when I actually went through and looked at the questions again and kind of refreshed my memory, there was nothing on there that, with a couple of notes, with an open query editor, that I couldn't go through and solve. Is it stuff I use all the time? No, but I understand how it works and how to piece those queries together, and can at least make some really good educated guesses on things and end up, right. So I would be pretty familiar with cipher, how to tweak queries, how to look at the query plan, just practice. Go through some of our sandboxes, go through our online training courses, build your own project or look at some existing projects out there. Just get comfortable reading cipher. And then I don't think any of the questions will be like, oh, I'm completely stumped, I don't know what to do. And if you get to that point, there is always your browser, right? You can just go out, type a question, what does this do? Or, hey, I need to refresh my memory, open the docs page for it. Any of that is perfectly acceptable as long as you give yourself some time. So again, try not to stress about it. This is open book. You are not completely, left in the dark on this. Just try to know the concepts so that you have very few questions you're having to reference something else. And then the only other thing I would add is, I was a little bit nervous too, because it's been so long since I have taken the exam to go back and look is like, would I actually pass, now after so many years, we've changed, the way we do things. Cipher has changed a lot. The way we talk about and the terms that we use have changed a little bit. And so I was a bit nervous that I wouldn't know some of the new and improved things. But all of it is very familiar. Again, going through and refreshing some things might not hurt, but if you're comfortable with Neo4j, I don't think any of it is out of reach at all. I don't think I would have any trouble going through and passing it again. I probably would not get every question right, I will admit, but I would be very nearly close and probably pass fine. So.
But that's also, you don't have to. I mean, you showed this earlier. I think you need to have an 80% score, and that's good enough. So
yep,
you don't have to be 100%.
Right. And if you are, that's so not fair.
Yeah.
Again,
okay.
We care mostly about the practice, that you have the skills, not that you get every question right.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the good thing. I mean, right. It's not at university where you prove you have learned everything by hand or by top of mind, but you have to have it. Generally, conceptually, you have to understand what's going on and how to apply things. And you can always look things up, right?
The wonderful thing about the career market, if you will, is that nobody cares after a certain point what your GPA or what your score was on the exam. It's just that you passed it.
Okay. Yeah.
So you have that bullet point you can add. Hey, I'm a Neo4j certified developer. That's all anybody cares about. We don't care about your score as long as you pass it.
Yeah, and we don't publish the score anyway, so you just get a pass. You pass it, fine. You have the exam certification, and you can show that off, and you don't see if you passed it just barely with 81% or you just scored 100%. It's fine.
Yep, and we also don't count attempts either.
Yeah,
so it won't show, hey, it took you 10 times to take this or whatever.
We don't care. 80.5%. You just passed after try number 15.
Yep.
Yeah, no, we don't do that. Let's do one more question, because I think that's an interesting one. since there could be questions where it's multiple choice and questions where you have to select one, will the question specify what if it's either or will we have you guess?
Oh, no, it'll be very clear. Now, the one thing I will say is it's so easy for people to not read the question all the way through. And checkboxes and radio buttons do look very similar. So just make sure, I mean, it will explicitly state, hey, select all that apply or choose, more than one that apply or whatever it is. But just be aware that you read the question all the way through, you understand, okay, this is a single answer or a multiple answer, and you choose that appropriately. That was the only thing when I was going through the exam, I was like, oh, that is a little bit confusing because you have radio buttons versus checkboxes, which are very similar looking. But the question will state exactly. So just make sure you read it.
Okay, super. That's great. Okay, one more question from Suleiman. Let's see if we can answer that. Any of the courses or certificates, well, more of the courses, I guess, focus on or cover Neo4j infrastructure management? Are you aware of any that cover that topic? I think the certification doesn't talk about it that much or cover it that much.
Yeah.
But we have a couple of other courses across the field, especially about development. I think there's like what you mentioned, build applications with various drivers, .NET, Spring Data, Node.js, Python, obviously. I'm not familiar or not aware of anything that is specifically going into DevOps or infrastructure management.
Yeah, we used to have a Neo4j admin course, but that got pretty out of date pretty fast. And so I'm pretty sure that's not out there anymore. I'm looking right now. I don't see it out there. But our operations tools and monitoring tools have changed a lot. So that could be definitely something we are looking into. I can check with our education team on that and see if there's a plan for a rehash of that or an update of that. But I know at one point we did have one. It's just not out there anymore because it's so out of date. We've changed a lot on the operations end of things.
Yeah.
And there is currently not a certification on that either.
No. Yeah. That I think is clear. Cool. Sorry, Suleiman, but we'll see. But that's maybe at least it's a good recommendation. We can always see if our GraphAcademy team got more of those in that regard, and if we see that there's demand for that, maybe we can cook something in the future.
Yeah.
And another question from Chris: how many Neo4j certificates are there? This is a good question.
It is.
The answer I don't have. So we will. It's a very good question actually to see if we can find that out and publish it at some point. Maybe we will save that for answering, and then we see if we can get that out there in the future. But I mean the number is relatively high because I'm seeing I'm overseeing the everybody gets a t-shirt who certificates and then who applies for the t-shirt. So in a month I'm getting about 200 plus requests for a t-shirt, and so you get about 2,500 t-shirt requests a year roughly, let's say. And we do this since I don't know, many years now. So it's well in the thousands of people that have completed certifications and are now proud Neo4j certified developers. The actual number I don't know, but it should be 10,000 plus probably.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Cool. I think that's a great wrap up. I would like to take the opportunity to obviously thank you very much, Jennifer, first of all, for the presentation. Hopefully they took away a little bit of the, I don't want to say fear, but maybe respect before the certification test. And it's like give it a shot. If you fail, nothing is really lost except for an hour of your life. And if you pass, well, you have something to show off in the developer community, and then you can do it again anytime you like. if you want to know more or see more from us, we will be back with a full day of pharma and life sciences content on the 2nd of July. We start at 9 a.m. Here Central European time and stream until 5 p.m. So full day with various use cases, lots of knowledge graphs, lots of AI use cases in the life sciences world. So I'm looking very much forward to this event, and it's finished by a Going Meta Live, where I think this will be the second episode that Jesus and I are in the same place and we do it together from the same location. I don't know how much we have now, episode probably 70 or 80, so we did a lot, but we now do the second one where we do it from the same place. So I'm really looking forward to this one after the Pharma Day, and I think I can skip that is done. And Notes is coming up as well. I'd like to mention that as well. If you are interested in more content, technical presentations from all kinds of users, Neo4j employees, but as well as from community members, that's the place to go.
In fact, there's a question in the chat about finding practical use case of Neo4j in education. There have been several nodes presentations in the previous years on this very thing. So feel free to check out our nodes playlist on YouTube and just kind of, or just do a YouTube search on Neo4j education or education in Neo4j, and some of those should pop up. There's some really good ones out there.
Yeah, that's good. Perfect. Yeah, great. This is a treasure trove. So if you look for the Notes 2024 playlist, you'll see so many nice presentations and interesting talks from last year. They're still relevant, and we got now through lots of submissions for the call for paper that just closed. So I'm really looking forward to the agenda for this year. So that's going to be another fun event. And I think we talked about this before. Where to start, where to go next. GraphAcademy course, Neo4j Aura free, takes almost zero time to set up. So you just log in with your credentials, and then you have an instance you can play with and just see how it feels and how it works. And the community page is always open for you. So if you have questions, if you have struggles with something, go to the community forum. If you want to know more, go to our developer pages. Lots of interesting content there, not only the documentations, but also in-depth technical guides and tutorials. So check that out. I hope that was helpful for you. I hope you now go and try out your best shot at the Neo4j certification. Maybe you'll pass. And I think Ari still runs a community challenge. So you have a couple of days left for posting your certification journey. I'll share that link as well in chat. Go to a community page, and I think you get a hoodie or a beanie rather if you like to enroll there and boast your Neo4j certification skills. So that's a cool activity we're running until the end of the month. Maybe we'll extend it a couple of more days, because next week is kind of like, what's it, June, July, who knows? But we'll we'll extend it a little bit maybe. But you have at least a weekend to prepare for the certification. And hopefully, the session today was helpful to all of you. And with that, I think we're at the end of it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for participating. Thank you for your questions. Thank you again, Jennifer. And see you soon.
Good luck to everybody taking the exam.